It's safe to say that Aston Martin haven't yet proved themselves in Formula 1 since their return in 2021. This team has a huge ambition to compete for the World Championship by 2026, so are they still on track? Let's have a look. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. Big ambitions. It's common that when teams change hands or come into the sport for the first time, they announce a grand vision. When Renault returned to F1 in 2016, they wanted to win a championship by 2021, and Andretti have already claimed that they want to be fighting to win the title within 5 to 6 years. And when Aston Martin took over from Racing Point in 2021, it was similar, with the team looking to compete for championships within 5 years. A slightly more realistic goal, but still a huge step to make. These grand plans tend to be ambitious, and I expect they're made with the intention of attracting sponsors and investors. Aston Martin are now 2 years into their 5-year plan, and the change in regulations saw them fall down the order relative to 2021. They were no longer knocking on the door of the best of the rest teams, and were often instead competing right down at the back of the order at the initial part of the year. This looked like a difficult time for the Aston Martin team. Their initial car design wasn't as competitive as they would have liked, and it seemed their opportunity to take a jump up the order had gone begging. They spent most of the season down in 9th position in the standings, which was even out of position for where you'd expect Racing Point to have been. The biggest challenge for Aston Martin in this instance was the fact that they had made a huge investment into the team. The Stroll money should have moved the setup away from being a challenger team with a limited budget and towards a setup with the same financial resources as the big hitters in Formula 1. But based on the early results in 2022, it felt like the team had gone backwards. They'd removed their long-standing team principal in Otmar Safnauer and had a car that seemed to be less competitive than the previous years. What this demonstrates is the fact that just investing financially in the team is not enough when it comes to delivering on track. This is one of the reasons why we've seen so many teams come into the sport with big ambitions, but ultimately fail to deliver on the expectations that they set for themselves. Gaining success in Formula 1 is clearly not a short-term process, and given there are at least 9 other teams starting each year with the same goals, getting the big ticket items right isn't enough to succeed in Formula 1. Instead, these teams need to find the small things that make small differences that collectively come together to give the team the edge. A great example of this is the recently dominant team in Mercedes. The team would fly pillows around the world to give their pit crews as comfortable an experience as possible, enabling them to have better sleep and be well rested for the weekend action. Similarly, the team ensures that every single team member has a parking space at the factory, so that they wouldn't have the added stress in the morning of where to park their car. These elements sound incredibly simple, but add up to make a massive difference. In Aston Martin's journey to achieve their bold ambition to be a championship challenging team, they have been outwardly focused on their big ticket items. Aston Martin's journey so far. Lawrence Stroll has been the key driver for Aston Martin's return to the F1 grid for the first time in more than 60 years. He led an investment consortium to rescue the Force India team in 2018, renaming it to Racing Point for 2019 and 2020. And after he invested in Aston Martin in early 2020, the team took that heritage name for the 2021 season. But it's not just a name change for the team. The Silverstone-based setup has been operating out of the same factory since it was created for the Jordan F1 team in 1991. This means that the more than 30-year-old setup is outdated and in need of modernisation. The team is fragmented and split over several office spaces, making it difficult to connect together and collaborate. Stroll is investing more than $200 million in a new state-of-the-art factory. The new setup will be built and operate in 3 parts, with the first scheduled to be built later this year. The new headquarters will include bridge connections between the areas, a central street feeling to create communal space, and even a new wind tunnel, which I believe will be a game changer for Aston Martin. And another game changer for the team has been their move to entice world champion drivers into the team. Sebastian Vettel joined in 2021, and now Alonso has taken his place. These statement moves show that they want the best in their team, and yes, they've only been able to attract drivers at the latter stage of their career at this point, but their experience will be invaluable to building the team into a championship contender. So there have been some obvious and major changes that have come as a result of the Aston Martin team, and the advantage that the new space will offer is clear. The larger team will now be able to operate more efficiently in the cost-capped F1 environment, and they'll be less reliant on the Mercedes wind tunnel that they've been operating in to this point. The importance of these changes is highlighted based on the fact that the team has grown. The Force India team was recognised for getting the absolute maximum from a shoestring budget. Their team was around just 500 people, which isn't exactly small, but it didn't even come close to the size of the setups of the top teams before the budget cap. In 2021, then team principal Otmar Safnauer confirmed that the team would be expanding to 800 people, which is another huge change for the team to get to grips with and adjust to. This shows how the team has been in a transition phase to achieve their goal and become a championship contender by 2026. Another significant change in the team has been in the team principal space. Safnauer was replaced by Mike Crack for 2022, an experienced team leader with a CV including names like BMW and Porsche. This change in leadership was perhaps one that recognised the change in size and mindset of the team, going from a midfield challenger that punched above its weight into a team that's in the conversation with the likes of Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes. Along with the departure of Safnauer came the departure of BWT as the team's main sponsor, the brand that meant the Force Indias and racing cars were pink. The brand obviously had less of an influence on their livery in 2021 as the racing green of Aston Martin took centre stage, but the two key sponsors that Aston Martin have now in Aramco and Cognizant are likely to be bringing in more sponsorship money as these large brands want to be associated with a big manufacturer name on the F1 grid. So while we can see the major transitions and changes that Aston Martin have been making, it's clear that all of these will have an impact on the day-to-day running of the team. For example, until the new factory is ready to go, the increasing number of people working for the team will be adding to the space constraints that they have today. Similarly, increasing the size of the team by more than 50% will have a big impact on the working processes and how they're collaborating. It's reasonable to expect it will take time for the team to find the best way of working together to produce a faster car. Are Aston Martin on the right track? It's difficult to comment on what might come in the future. The team's move in the driver markets has shown a positive intent, but there's an elephant in the room, and that's the fact that Lance Stroll is probably holding them back from achieving their true potential. If they want to become a realistic title challenger, then either Stroll needs to improve, or the team need to make the call to bring a stronger number 2 driver in. Similarly, the team need to be thinking about a longer-term strategy to replace Fernando Alonso. The 41-year-old has signed a multi-year deal, but surely he will reach a point where he's no longer as quick as he is today. In terms of the big-ticket items that we can see, the team seem to be doing everything right. They're building their new factory and increasing the size of the team. They're also bringing many elements in-house like the wind tunnel, which will enable faster and more effective communication. So all these elements are going to be in place for their long-term goal of fighting for the championship within 5 years. However, we've seen many teams knocking on the door of the top 3 in F1 for the last decade. Ultimately, both McLaren and Alpine have got stuck in that best of the rest spot and have been unable to take the leap to the top. Perhaps it will be different for Aston Martin given they've got all these huge investments in the team, but that final piece of the puzzle will be difficult to find, and that's where this is going to be a fascinating time to watch this team. Coming into 2023, I think Aston Martin have a huge amount of momentum. They recognised their mistakes with the 2022 car before the season began and quickly pivoted to bring in their B-spec car that they bought in at the Spanish Grand Prix. This is a positive sign, and the fact that their development went from strength to strength from that point onwards bodes well for the season ahead. I think that by the end of 2023, if Aston Martin are competing with McLaren and Alpine regularly, then not only will it be an exciting time to watch F1, but it'll also be a great step for this team as they take steps to become a championship challenger. So for me, I believe Aston Martin are on track to be a title challenger in the future, but there are certainly difficult hurdles ahead.